Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. I trust that you are well. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your hosts, life coach and motivational speaker Bo Powell, social media influencer and owner of the For Real brand Lindsberg Petway, and yours truly, leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott, also known as BJE. Our goal is to build, to inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations around the topics of business, leadership, and mental health. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Today, we welcome to the Lifeline podcast, Reverend Jeremiah Hicks. He's a man who loves God first. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a preacher. He's a teacher and a gospel artist. He has also accompanied several national gospel artists such as Kim Burrell, and he is a viable part of the gospel music community in the D.C., Maryland, and Virginia region known as the DMV. So today, Mr. Jeremiah, Reverend Jeremiah, you told us to call you. How are you today, my friend?
I'm great. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think this is a pretty cool thing to be a part of. I'm honored. What's up? What's up? How y'all feeling?
What's up, brother? Doing good. How you doing?
Amazing.
We're glad to have you.
Glad to have you, my man.
Glad to be here.
So I want to welcome you to the Lion's Den because you're dealing with two militant brothers. You know, the one that's dressed like the banker and the Wall Street lawyer. They are militant.com. So,
yeah.
I'm the calm in the storm.
Oh, wow.
Usually the person who says that is not the, you know what I'm saying? Usually who puts that out there is really not what they put out. You know what I mean? I just see Lindsberg, he had the three-piece on today, so I was like, okay, that was just a heads up that, hey, don't come in here half-stepping with Petway, man. So.
Yeah, this is what I was feeling today. God is good.
Hey, I'm with you, man. I'm feeling with you.
That's funny.
Yeah, Jeremiah.
Yes, sir.
It's a pleasure to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am I'm a PK. I've grown up in church all my life. I am a husband, a father, preacher, singer. I just enjoy life. I enjoy family. I enjoy the balance of the two. And I'm just trying to enjoy my life, make sure that I am being a provider and all things to my family as much as I can. But man, I love God. I love family. I love people. I'm a people person. And I'm excited to be with you guys to share in this space right now. So I'm just a regular down to earth guy who's had a lot of great experiences in ministry, and I'm humbled by them. And I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful.
That's great. When you first introduced yourself, the first adjective that you gave yourself was PK. What's a PK for those who don't know?
Yeah, PK is a preacher's kid, and even more specifically, a pastor's kid. You know, my dad was assistant pastor for years, and then a year after I was born, he became pastor of a church where he pastored for 37 years. 37 years as pastor, and I served for many, many, many years at that church when my parents, in June of 2022, when they transitioned, my wife and my family, we transitioned as well. And I'm a PK. I'm a preacher's kid. I'm a church boy. I'm not ashamed of it, not afraid of it. And I've just, that's who I am. That's what I am. And I can't take it back.
Right. So since you grew up in the church and you've been there most of your life, what are some of your earliest memories of growing up in the church? Because I'm a little familiar with that as well. My grandfather was a preacher and a bishop, so we share that.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny that you asked that. Some of my earliest moments in church were probably some of the craziest moments in terms of, I know church school, Sunday school back then, it's 2024 now. They don't have Sunday school. These kids don't know about Sunday school, but Sunday school was amazing for me. We also used that time. My church was in Northwest DC, uptown in the hood. And during the Sunday school moments, the older kids would take us to the corner store. We go to the corner store and we would buy all kind of candy and snacks and juices or water or whatever it is. So some of my earliest moments are, when we snuck out of church.
Snuck out. Oh my God.
Come on now.
We snuck out to go to the corner store when they were shouting hard. We was like, all right, come on. We ran to the corner store.
To make it back safe. We made it back safe. We didn't get
Absolutely.
caught.
Absolutely. That was the blessing.
Right.
So, growing up being, in the children's choir on the board, that was a phenomenal experience. And then we had something back in the day where on Saturdays, it was the fourth Saturday of every month, we had outreach for the children, man, and they would do all kind of events and fun things with us. They didn't, just allow church just to be a moment where we came in as kids and we saw everybody shouting and worshiping, praising and preaching, but they also brought real life experiences to us and allowed us to be children in the church. So I was grateful, man. We had back in the day, we had a small church. And so basically probably seated about 150, 200, we would go in the church basement and just run amok down there. And also another amazing memory was, back in the day, we used to have afternoon services. So when the morning service was going on, you started to smell that fried chicken and those greens.
Right.
Church punch. So those are some great memories growing up in church for me.
So growing up in that environment and watching your father do ministry, when did you think you would be in ministry, or did you ever think you would be in ministry as you are now?
That's a great question. If I could be honest, I never wanted to be in ministry, especially preaching ministry. I never wanted it. I never looked for it. I avoided it until I was 18 years old. I was going to Prince George's Community College. And I remember being in my parents' house at the age of 18. And I remember I was ironing my clothes in my parents' house, getting ready to go my first year of college. And I remember one morning waking up as I was ironing, and literally I felt like God was like, hey, man, I want you to preach. I mean, I heard it just like that. Closed the door. I locked it. I started crying because I was overwhelmed because I felt the presence of the Lord saying, hey, this is what I want you to do. Wow. And at that moment, I couldn't run. I couldn't run from it. So I never ran, but I never ran to it. So when he called me to preach at the age of 18, I said yes to the Lord. And I remember I didn't tell my parents immediately. I got into my vehicle and got on 495 and was headed up the Beltway towards Largo, Maryland. And as I was headed there, I had that overwhelming feeling again. And I had to call my parents. I called them from my cell phone and said, hey, y'all, I couldn't tell y'all this before, but God called me to preach. They were like, for real? For real? I was like, yeah. And they could tell by the conviction of how I was speaking, what I was saying. They prayed for me on the spot and said, well, look, we'll talk when you get back home. But, we're glad you heard from God and we got you. We're going to cover you the entire way. So that's the long story short.
So what was it like growing up the son of a pastor? And I noticed that you said that it was something that you never wanted to do. Yeah. So was it because you saw the work that your father was doing, the labor of love, the time, the effort, the commitment to it? What was it?
I saw the work. I saw the labor of love. And I think what really at the time kind of pushed me away was that I saw a lot. I knew my parents' heart for God, for people, for ministry. And I saw people that I felt like my parents helped along the way, encouraged along the way. I saw my dad go into his own pocket, and take money out. I've seen him give away cars to people who, even as a kid, I thought it was undeserving, in a sense. And I've seen people come and I've seen people go. So that put me in a place where I was like, man, I don't want to do this. I don't want any parts of this. Like, this is ludicrous. So as a pastor's son, I'm not going to lie, I struggled a lot as a child because my dad was very faithful, very committed, very loyal. And I felt that in moments where I felt people at times walked away, didn't walk away the correct way. And as a child, I was very discerning. My parents would tell you to this day, I was very discerning. They had to really refrain from even having adult conversations with me because I was so discerning of so many things. I felt it. So as a PK growing up, I was conflicted oftentimes because I felt like in church that it was a way that we were all supposed to be. Oftentimes I felt like the black sheep, that's the pastor's son. So when certain birthday parties happened or invites happened, a lot of times I didn't get that because, people were like, we don't want the pastor's son around, and
Right.
so it made me a black sheep in a sense, but it also taught me to be myself. It taught me early to just to be okay with being me and to be okay with not having a whole lot of people around until I really did get like a great circle of friends. So it was a roller coaster for me, but I also on the other side, I learned a lot being a PK. I was able to be an influence for friends who I'm still friends with right now. They would say, man, I was scared to not cuss in front of my friends. I was scared to do this, but I saw that you did this and you did this. And I felt compelled, like, if you can do it, I can do it. So there were pros and cons, and I wrestled with it. But overall, I think it's made me a balanced person. And I understand ministry and I understand life and I understand people and God a lot better now. And it's helping me in ministry today.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. How did you use those experiences when you saw those different things at such a young age? How has it affected you, or how do you use it now in your own ministry?
So when I went to school, my heart was for the black sheep. My heart was for the person that was sitting at the, uncool table at lunch, all of those things. So because of it, I felt like I knew how they felt. So in ministry, it allowed me to connect with people who others wouldn't connect with. And I saw other people being mistreated. I was able to kind of mediate the situation. Like, nah, man, he's cool. Don't do that. You don't know what this person's gone through. And so to this day, I'm a type of person where I absolutely love people, and I'm absolutely drawn to the ones that people don't want to be around, the ones who have been cast out. So I believe that portion of life taught me to be empathetic and sympathetic to people who God created, no matter how we view them and look at them. It's a great thing for me now to be able to see what God sees in other people. So I really try to make that a lot of the forefront of my ministry.
That's good stuff. You said something, a couple things that really stuck out to me. You said that when you told your parents you were called to preach, they were excited, and which is an indication to me that they never forced you. They gave you the space to be and to become. Because a lot of times, one of the reasons that there is a disdain for PKs is because in some churches, there's nepotism. There was not dedication. There was not your parents weren't trying to establish a dynasty. And so that spoke to me, that they gave you the space to be Jeremiah rather than to be a clone of your father. That's special.
Absolutely. It's funny you use the word nepotism. My dad would use that word a lot when I was growing up, and a lot of kids my age didn't know what nepotism meant. But my dad would always say, I never want to be found being guilty of nepotism. If you have a calling, even as it pertains to my brother or how it pertaining to my mom, my dad allowed us to work in spaces of ministry that we were absolutely called to, but it wasn't a forced thing. He didn't force us on the people. He didn't, hey, look at my wife. Hey, look at my son. My dad he was equal opportunity. And it created just a life of balance for us because he never wanted us to feel like we were superior or better to anybody else, that we were just like everybody else. And, we're called and other people called. And so, nepotism was a big word in our house because my dad said he never wanted to be found guilty of it, but he also didn't want to deny us the experience of our call and what we were called and assigned to do. So yeah, that word that you mentioned was huge. I heard it all growing up. My dad said I never want to, be that because I want, people to know that this is my family. I love them. They're called to do what they do, but I'm never gonna overdo it, oversaturate them. If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So it's evident just the way you talk about your dad and even what you post on social media that your dad has had an incredible impact in your life.
Oh yeah.
How has your father's ministry informed the way that you do ministry and show up as a minister?
Wow. Man, it's so much. I could write a book. My dad, I love the scripture that says the just man walks in his integrity and his children are blessed after him. One thing I can say about my dad, and I love him, is that he's not perfect. None of us are. But my dad was an integral man. And he had conversations, open, transparent conversations with us about life, not just about spiritual life, but as kids, I remember he told us what his salary was. He told us that he tithed. He told us, how to save money. He got credit cards for us when we were kids, when we were younger, and was like, hey, I want you to start building your credit. And so my dad, and he'll tell you, now, my dad grew up in Southeast DC, was in the hood. He had a whole bunch of stuff happening. And then God changed his life and turned his life around. And one thing he never wanted to be was a terrible father or a terrible husband. And so he did what he needed to do to be there for us, to have genuine. And I can't even leave out my mom. Like my parents, I felt like were just a great balanced couple. They weren't those parents that, if the teacher said, oh, Jeremiah did this, or my brother did this, oh, my child doesn't do that. They would have honest conversations. Hey, this is what your teacher said. What happened? I want to hear your side. And so while they advocated for us, they also taught us to not be, as that other word, narcissistic, in terms of thinking that we were invincible, pointing the finger at everybody, very transparent to say, hey, son, this was your fault. This is how you're going to fix it. And he gave us room to be able to make decisions and make changes. And so they, and like this, my parents would tell you that they didn't have a blueprint on parenting, especially parenting, in the church, but they did what they felt was best. And I feel like God led them to be the godly parents that my brother and I really needed them to be.
Wow. So how does the way that your father balanced home life and church life influence the way that you do the same?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. Growing up, my brother and I, we did karate, we played soccer, we played football, Boys and Girls Club. We did all of those things. And so no matter how many Bible studies my dad had, no matter how many Sunday mornings or revivals that he had, he always made room and made space to make sure we were supported. Not just at our games, not just on the big day, but he was at practice. Wow. We could look over there and see in practice that our dad was here. And there was times where he had to preach revival and he came dressed up in his suit, and he had to leave early, a little bit sometimes, or he would be coming from preaching and coming to our games and doing all those things. And there were times where he would tell certain pastors, if it was a 3-night revival and there was a game on a Friday, he would say, hey, pastor, I don't know how you want to handle this. I can do 2 nights, but that third night, my boys have a game.
Wow.
Right. And so they, my daughter, she does swimming, she does soccer, she does gymnastics, she does so many things. I make sure as busy as I am that I show up. Now I can't be at every single thing. And I thank God for my wife who's able to get her to all those things. But, just tonight, came back from practice, soccer practice, made sure that I was there. My daughter's always asking, Dad, are you coming to my game? Dad, you coming to my practice? I'm like, yeah, baby, I'm going to be right there in my chair, sitting on the side with my wife, just kind of chilling, cheering her on, or sometimes saying, hey, stop slacking, and so the home life and the spiritual life. My dad has a saying, I'm glad you said it. It's, we're no more divine than we are domestic. And so we are spiritual, but we're also natural. So when my dad fed us spiritually, he also fed us naturally, not just with food, but with his presence, with my parents, with their presence, with transparent conversation, with love, with showering us with gifts, and sometimes bought us gifts even when we didn't deserve it. And he was like, see, I don't want you to think that you get this just because you deserve it. We don't always deserve it. It's because you're my son and I love you.
Man, that's absolutely amazing, because oftentimes when you talk to ministers, especially pastors, it's just the total opposite. It's all church and very little home, right? And so I just think that's absolutely phenomenal. Just kudos to your parents and your dad for being able to balance that, and understanding that like he said, we're no more domestic than divine. That's just powerful, that our families are just an extension of God. You know what I mean? We're not separate from that. So I'm curious, just as a minister of the gospel today, I mean, obviously, as you grow and you mature, our understanding changes, or it grows or expands, or we come into a greater understanding of things. So what are some things that you understand today that you didn't necessarily understand growing up, that's maybe become clearer for you now?
Wow. Well, Growing up, I felt like if people weren't loyal, if people weren't consistent, I was going to give the same energy.
Mm.
And I realized it in life and as being a believer, when the Bible tells you, how we ought to respond to our enemies and how we ought to respond to each other, how we ought to love them, turn the other cheek. I've learned empathy. I've learned compassion. I've learned how to love. I've learned how to love even when love is in return. I've learned how to clap when others don't clap. For me, I've learned that if I have the resources to bless somebody who I know wouldn't bless me, I've been led to do those things at times. So I've learned how to love. I've learned, and I am still learning how to do that because I still wrestle with it at times. So that's one of the things growing up. I will say that God is teaching me currently how to be who he's called me to be authentically, regardless or irregardless of what other people do. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. So, I mean, with that being said, like, because you bring up a good point, because nowadays, I mean, matching energy and stuff, that's just kind of the thing, whether you're a believer or not. You know what I mean?
Unfortunately, it's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's just kind of how it is. So, and obviously the church is, always been under scrutiny, but even more so today, especially with the onset of social media and things like that. So, as someone who, it's just a blessing to just hear your experience as a kid. I'm just kind of blown away by that. I've just never heard of, many pastors just say, look, I can't do a 3-day revival. I gotta stop because I'm still kind of caught up in that.
Yeah.
But just from your perspective, what's maybe a major concern you have about ministry or just the church in general, if any at all?
One of my major concerns in ministry is that I feel like we know how to preach to one another. We know how to prophesy to one another. We know how to come off powerfully. But if somebody falls, we don't know how to restore each other. I believe that the church has so much word, so much prophecy, so much revelation. But when one falls, we don't know how to cover each other. We don't know how to restore one another. We cancel each other. We don't know how to put our arms around our brother or our sister and be like, you know what? I'm just like you. I may not have done what you've done, but I've done something that was offensive. I've done something that could have thrown me under the bus. And I feel like the church has lost its essence in terms of when a man falls, that we don't know how to lift that man up. We don't know how to see one another and take us, and say, you know what? I'm not going to cast a stone because I'm not without sin. I'm not without flaw. I'm not without, whatever. And so I just feel like that's one of the things. Another thing I feel like the church has kind of done is, and as it pertains, and as I'm a worship leader, I believe that our worship should please God overall. It should please God. And I just believe that a lot of times in church, we have built our worship based upon our opinions and our own preference. And I believe a lot of times God is not getting the glory out of what we do because we put our liking on everything and say, God bless it. And so because of it, we have moments, and even though we may have preferences for certain type of music, certain type of genre, some of us love hymns, some of us love the spiritual songs, some of us love contemporary Christian music, some of us just love the old school Black gospel, some of us love quartet. Guess what? I love it all because I feel that if God can get the glory in all of it, I can walk in anybody's church and I can worship. I can bless God. I can praise God. And I don't have to be in a familiar Black church space or familiar way of doing things. And I don't get stuck in a way of worship and say, you know what you do isn't worship because it's not what I'm used to. So I think that the church is in a state sometimes where our worship has become more preferential than it has become what God wants. Like we come together and we plan and we strategize and we meet and we bring our great ideas all day, but we take 2 minutes to say the prayer. God, thank you. We honor you. God bless us. And then we spend a long time just planning and doing these things. And it's like, wait a minute, is this what God really, really wants?
Yeah.
And so I think, that's a concern of mine in terms of the worship experience in church. And as it pertains to who we are as God's people, what does he want? I mean, who's asking that question? You know what I mean? What does he
Yeah.
want?
Yeah. That's
Dude,
two
I think
major
that's
concerns. Yeah, those are two real ones too, because people forget that sometimes we have to go to church to redeem ourselves, and we forget that where we were. And then on the
Yeah.
worship side, I too was personally convicted because I was at a church where worship, praise and worship was high. It was at a high level,
Yeah.
standard of excellence. And then I went to another church where it was more, I'll say bland. And that was one of my hurdles, me personally, because I was used to this. And like you said, you used to, sometimes we need entertainment. We used to the breaks and the sounds, and I need this to feel a certain way. But when I went to this church, who was more diverse, I'm like, man, this is terrible. I couldn't even get in it. I mean, I'm being convicted. I'm being just honest. I'm like, terrible, babe. She's like, well, just stick it out. And I've been there like 7 years now. And since I've been there, I've grown to mature past what I'm used to, because I was at a place where there was a Grammy winner. So it was a standard of excellence. And so everything had to be like this for the worship to work in their eyes. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you said, I believe God got the glory in that. But that was a great concern because it was something I had to mature past myself.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, that's crazy powerful. But I wanted to, your first concern, why do you think that is? When people fall, that there's such a challenge or disconnect. Because I mean, Scripture clearly says, if you see a man over, ye who are spiritual, restore such a one, in the spirit of meekness. Like, I mean, why do you think that is that's even a conversation or a concern? You know what I mean?
I think it's several reasons. I'll just name a couple. I think one of them is, I think that, and I'm gonna say it, I think we have a lot of arrogant people in the church. I believe that there's a lot of arrogance. I believe that, especially as African Americans, we've grown to the point where a lot of us have gone to school, educated, have done this and have done that. And even though we're carriers of the word and we genuinely do love God, some of us think that because of our accomplishments that we're better than others. And you can see it in how, the Bible says out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So even on social media, I'll see spats between preachers and spats between prophets of who's the greatest theologian, who has the most revelation, and, who has this. And, we're just tearing each other down and criticizing each other. So I think arrogance is one of those things. I think also that some of us sometimes grew up in a space where we may have been rejected. And all those things that we have,
it's good.
Letters before and behind our names now, our call has validated us to the point where we just think that we are invincible. And I just think that we should be very careful with how we view people, because at the end of the day, we're all God's creation. And I ask God every day, God, show me what you see in my neighbor. And, I had to grow to this point. But I had a serious issue with someone years ago, something I was affiliated with, and I started to feel a certain type of way. And one day I woke up and God was like, I want you to see them how I see them. And it blew my mind, because I'm like, God, I don't want to see them through your lens, because I know what they've done to me. I know how I feel about them. And of course, I wasn't innocent. I had my part in those things as well. But I just think, I'm gonna stick with the word arrogance. I think arrogance is a big thing right now, where people think they're just better than others. When you see yourself on the same playing ground, no matter where you've been, whether you went to, Harvard, and whether this person has a high school education, if you're called and I'm called, why don't we come together, validate the call together, and be great? Let's share. Let's let iron sharpen iron, because there's some street smarts that you have that I don't have. There's book smarts that you have that I don't have. But if we will all just humble ourselves, I think that's the word. We would just humble ourselves. And I just think this, not just the world, the church would be such a better place.
Sure. And truly become that light that God's called it to be. So, and so obviously, Brother Hicks, you come from, a great spiritual pedigree, great pastoral pedigree, and just even great family pedigree. So with that being said, I mean, what do you want your legacy to be as a minister of the gospel? I mean, what does that look like?
Wow. I want my legacy to be humility. That's what I want my legacy to be. I know a lot of people say, oh, I want to be known to be, a great theologian. I had great words. I had this. Man, I wanted to be that this dude loved God so much to be low enough to, become all things to all men.
Yeah.
I want my legacy to be, I go places and I've been able, thank God. I mean, it's only God that he's opened doors. He's allowed my gift to make room for me, the gift that he's given me. And so I've been able to travel and be with some of gospel's greatest, but I still come home and I sing at storefront churches.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm never too big for that. I still come off stage at my church and go into first and second Sundays. I'm with the teenagers in a whole nother room where there are no cameras.
Wow.
I'm still able to pick up the phone. Somebody pulled me to the side on Sunday and was like, hey, bro, I was tired. We have 3 services on Sunday. We worked hard. Somebody text me. Say, hey, bro, I'm here. I lingered after service. Can you pray for me? It's those moments that really bless me more than the stage. More than people say, oh, you bless me in worship. That's all good. That's all fine. But the fact that I'm able to just make human connection with people, my legacy is I want them to say, you know what, this dude was like God because, he was like Christ because he was humble. He didn't think he was better than anybody else, and that's what I want my legacy to be, is that I was approachable, is that I carried the fruit, like I had the fruit of the Spirit.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Not perfect, but I knew how to pray when times got hard. I knew how to, not give up or give in or quit because I didn't like something. I've learned how to persevere in ministry. I've learned how to have integrity. I've learned how, I've learned that being, the bigger person sometimes is knowing that you're right about a situation and saying, you know what? It's no reason to argue. I'm good. We're good. Let's keep it moving. So humility, I would say humility is what I want my legacy to be.
Bro, and you hit, as you were speaking, I was just thinking that's Christ likeness right there.
Yeah.
Period, point blank.
Yeah.
That's Christ likeness. I mean, just you think of that scripture, he thought it not robbery, but being equal to God, he humbled himself as a servant. And that was his legacy. He was never too big. For any stage. He was ridiculed for talking with all the undesirable people. That's just Christ likeness, man. That's powerful. That is powerful. So before we close out this episode of the podcast, Hicks, I always like to give opportunity for people to be able to find you, on social media, stuff like that. So let everybody know how they can connect with you on social media, or if they're in the Maryland area, how they can connect with you.
Absolutely. I am on all social media platforms. Well, not all. I'll list Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all at Jeremiah Hicks, JeremiahHicks. And I'm at Kingdom Fellowship, AME Church in Calverton, Maryland, where I'm on the leadership team there in the music ministry as associate minister of music. You can find me there either at our 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or 12 o'clock services, as well as we're about to launch a new campus in Gaithersburg, where I'll be transitioning to that location as the full-time minister of music there. But yeah, you see me on social media, you see me post family, you see me post church, you see me post ministry, and even just other family randomness. I love my family. I love, what I do. So I'm around at Jeremiah Hicks, and I'm just a down to earth dude, I feel like.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you can sit all over you, man. You said, somebody who's approachable, but it's also somebody who's touchable.
Yeah, that's good.
You know what I mean? And I think that's great, man. So, well, this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your host, BJE, Lindsberg Petway, and Bo Powell. Now, don't forget to check us out on www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household. So join us and let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care and God bless.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lindsberg Petway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.